I am Allen County Public Library's Director for Community Programs and Partnerships, and I am just so glad to see you here tonight. The mission of Allen County Public Library is to enrich our community through lifelong learning and discovery. And I've been thinking about this event tonight quite a lot. I'm a librarian. I love to learn new things. It's kind of what I'm all about, have been my whole life. I love being like that high achiever and acing the tests at school, that kind of thing. I wanted to prove that I knew what I was talking about and that I was an expert. But over the last several years, I began to realize how much was lacking from some of the things that I've been taught my whole life. I didn't learn as much as I thought I did about history, about culture. In school, in my family, I learned a lot. But there was so much more to learn, even about the same things I had already learned about. There's more to each of those stories than just the story that I was told growing up. So I'm excited that we're all here tonight because understanding our past and our identity as Fort Wayne and as Allen County means reflecting on what we've learned, but also reflecting on what other people have learned through what they were taught and through their own experiences. This is an evening where we can think and talk about our hurts and worries and identity and history, but not in isolation as individuals. We're here to do it together. And we're here to find out what can happen when we look at our history and our present, learn from it, and then look to the future with more wisdom and more maturity, well-being, courage maybe, than we had before. I'm excited to learn tonight how history can heal and unite us. And I'm so glad you're here with me for that. And as a representative of the library, I'm also just really excited to find out how this conversation will enrich our community, what we're going to discover together. So thank you so much for being here. I'd like to also extend my thanks to Sharon Tubbs, to our local experts who will be sharing tonight, to the ACPL staff, and many other nonprofit organizations who are represented here tonight, all of whom who have put effort toward making this a successful event. And thank you all for coming. I hope you'll enjoy the conversation, and I also invite you to join us in the lobby after we close tonight for some delicious desserts and the opportunity for more discussion about what we've learned and what might be next for our community. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Sharon Tubbs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm a little winded because I just had to run out to the lobby because I forgot that I was old and needed my glasses to read. So yes, I am Sharon Tubbs, and that was a hard sprint, y'all. Yes, I need to take my time. So I'm Sharon Tubbs. And some of you know me as the director of Health Visions Midwest of Fort Wayne, where our team works on behalf of underserved individuals. Others are familiar with my work as a writer and an author. Indeed, when I began working on my latest book, They Got Daddy, which takes place in a historic setting in Alabama, and takes a look at racism and how it led to a tragic season in my grandfather's life. This is when I began to understand the healing power of history, hence the name of this program. Again, when was the last time y'all did a 50-yard dash? Okay, hold on. Okay. And what I mean by this is that when I was doing this research, I found that as I looked back on our family's history and our family's culture, there were some things that I had to deal with and grapple with that were unpleasant. There was some racism in the past that I had to look at. And what I found was that as I looked at these different challenges that we endured culturally and as a family, there was a healing that took place inside of me. Healing from cultural trauma and things that I didn't even know that I needed healing from. And so I began to think, I began to wonder, if history could do that for me as an individual, what would happen if we created a platform where we could introduce the history of some hot button issues right here in Fort Wayne, and people could be educated about that history, and then they could dialogue about that history and offer their different perspectives about that history, and then leave being better. That's why we're here tonight. We're here tonight to bring knowledge and different perspectives, to open dialogue, and for some, to plant a desire to learn more. And I know I just messed up the slideshow, but that's okay. We'll get to it. We don't expect to solve world or community issues tonight, but we do hope that minds will be opened, that different perspectives will be considered and respected, laying the groundwork for us all to do better and to be better together. So this is the format that we're going to use tonight. Tonight we're going to discuss 3 topics. These are hot button issues in Fort Wayne right now, and not only in Fort Wayne, in many of the communities across the nation. We're going to talk about blackface, why that is so offensive to African American people. We're going to talk about mass incarceration and some of the data behind it. We're going to talk about the movement to rename a dedicated street for someone who's revered by many, but has a history of being a slaveholder. What does that mean? Again, an issue that is touching many parts of our country, and in Fort Wayne, we're going to talk about Calhoun Street. We've gathered 3 experts. I'm going to call them, they probably wouldn't call themselves experts. I'm getting like a side eye from some of them right now. 3 presenters, how about that? And you're going to hear a presentation from each of them. And their presentations are going to be pretty succinct, just 10 minutes long, okay? And that's going to provide us with an overview of that issue. Then we're going to open the floor for discussion that we talked about. We're going to open the floor for discussion and dialogue, respectfully, okay? So, without further ado, I've huffed and puffed long enough. And so we're going to go on ahead and get started with our very first presenter. Roberta Ridley is a young woman who I have grown to truly admire. And she's going to talk about the history of blackface. Again, a topic that will make you cringe in some ways, but I bet there's going to be some different perspectives in the room. Roberta is the founding chairwoman of the African American Genealogical Society of Fort Wayne, which promotes genealogy research to preserve the history of Black families. She is a retired employee of the Allen County Public Library, a faculty member of the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute, and an independent researcher. She remains active in the community. Roberta, you can make your way up. She remains active in the community, always working toward cultural understanding with diversity and historic awareness. Everybody, please welcome Roberta Ridley.
Good evening, and thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your very cozy evening to be here with us. And I sincerely hope that you will not be disappointed in what is shared. I expect to be enlightened myself. Pardon me? Oh, she says I can stand if I want to. Imagine that, and she referred to herself as being older. I'll pass. Yes. And does it disturb you being able to see the screen behind me? Any of you? Okay. So I'm first because I'm older, and because I'm going to look at older records, okay? As indicated by Sharon, we're going to take a look at the history of blackface. Blackface is a sensitive subject for a lot of people, either because they just cringe at the thought of it, or they don't understand it, or they just don't want to talk about it, which is quite often the case. I wasn't there when blackface started, you know, so clearly I can't really explain the rationale of its beginnings, nor can I be expected to describe the original psychological impact of it with the people involved, social response, or even the overall acceptance, which is a very key word in all of this. It doesn't take Einstein, Freud, or a rocket scientist to figure out that the low level of character that's necessary for, to me, this depth of moral assassination is caused, that it has caused when, then, and what it does now. Because many of you already know, have personally had to witness or digest the information that has been shared on that perspective here of late. And since we only have a few minutes, I'm going to try to dive. I'm Lutheran, but I'm like a Baptist preacher when it comes down to genealogy. It's kind of hard to do 10 minutes, okay? So I think it's important that you understand that the perpetuation of the concept of blackface is something that evolved very, very early in the 1800s. It wasn't just something that popped up because of the emancipation of slavery. And so we need to take, I would say, relax your mind and go back as I run through some of these things, okay? On the screen, there's an image of one of the earlier depictions of the blackface character. And it has history to itself. The interesting part of it is that the historian Dale Cockrell, I'm going to be doing quite a bit of fast reading here too, so, noted that poor working class whites who felt squeezed politically, economically, and socially from the top, but also from the bottom, invented the minstrelsy as a way of expressing oppression and marked being members of the majority, but outside of the white norm. Ponder that for a minute. Because if you're in your own culture group and you're not really accepted in your own culture group, you've got to come up with a way to figure out how you can raise yourself over those who you seem to be equivalent to in terms of poverty, indentured servitude, things of that nature. So being able to make a mockery of those who you would like to have seen or want to be seen as less than you, it becomes a primary effort, and it was a primary effort of poor whites during this particular genre of transition in these United States. And so they came up with this way of imitating what they considered those to be less than. And by doing so, they blackened their faces using a burnt cork, shoe polish, and other things that, for me, they really didn't like their life at all because if you put stuff like that into your skin by your nasal passage and your eyes, you're also jeopardizing your own survival to for any length of time, I would say. But obviously it was that important. It's also significant that in doing so, they sought to make it an entertainment to the white masses. So to go out and mimic what they thought was a way of putting down black enslaved people of that time, using exaggerated imagery on the face, emphasizing the lips, outlining the eyes, using a drawl that they literally had to make up for themselves and emphasize as being more derogatory in diction, in the way that they talked. So if you're going to do it, then you got to obviously do it in such a way that those people appear to be less than. Notating some interesting notes from the history. There's a gentleman by the name of Thomas Dartmouth Rice, who is known as the father of ministry. I always have, like, I want to say minister, but it's not right. Minister, you know what I'm saying, okay? Developed the very popular blackface character. And anybody that needs me to reiterate this or show you documentation afterwards, I'm more than happy to share, okay? But he began this in 1830. And he took it on the road, and he started performing in 1830 in New York City. Understand, this is something that they are emphasizing as a Southern characteristic of enslaved people, but making it be a concept that all black people should be seen in this way. So clearly takes his interpretive image of blacks from the South into the North, New York City of all places, right? So I want to, because I'm highlighting, I have to move it. There's another image of I think that's the toy that we're looking at. And for my part, I don't know about you guys, but we're talking psychological brainwash, quick, fast, and in a hurry. If you give a child a toy like that, and you talk about another culture group as being idiots, basically unintelligent, untalented, etc., and you give that child a toy to play with, what's going to be the child's interpretation moving forward? Without saying a word, the image itself depicted in the toy says something to the child that is negative about being black, which is not true. Because if they really thought about it, if you were that stupid, could you actually play the instrument? Okay. So these thoughts were carried on in postcards and all sorts of images. There were dishes that were made, and I'm not just talking about the Aunt Jemimas, but they're depicted in a blackface. Most blackface performances, and I dare say the majority of them, were done with white people putting on the image of a black person. And so we have an image of that. And I want to share with you a comment that was made by our illustrious leader, Mr. Frederick Douglass. It is noted from some intense research by the author Eric Lott, who did do a lot of research on the concept of blackface and its impact. And he decided that the concept of this blackface performance was something that was the filthy scum of white society who have stolen from us a complexion denied to them by nature, in which to make money and pander to the corrupt taste of their fellow white citizens. Powerful words, and they are accurate words, because again, let's reflect back on the fact that they were doing something to make them appear and or feel more accepted by their own culture by playing down the black culture. Frederick Douglass also is noted as an individual who hardly joked and rarely smiled because he never wanted anybody to assume that he was not serious. And if minstrel entertainment is what they were looking at to determine what a black person's capability and intellect was being perpetuated, he wasn't going to be a part of it. I personally agree with him. I smile at a good joke every now and then, and it takes a kid rolling around in the grass and doing something totally silly for me to really laugh out loud. Because this business of cultural degradation, be it in image of blackface or any other way, mocking one's culture is not funny, and never should it be assumed to be funny. I think it's interesting that, and you can throw your finger up whenever you think I should back up or stop, Sharon, please, is something that Hollywood also has made acceptable. And some of our favorite performers throughout the years have imitated blackface. Most recently, to my surprise, and I don't know when I missed, or when it was 1993, which I was very much adult, and don't know how I missed it, but the popular and otherwise wonderful Whoopi Goldberg, who was married to Ted Danson, right? There was a severe lashing that they received for doing a comedian presentation of blackface together. I would like to think that her heart was in the right place, that his heart was in the right place, since they seemingly shared hearts together for a while. But to bring back an acceptance of blackface performance is like, Whoopi did that? So how many times has it slid under the radar, right in our very faces, that we accepted this type of degradation, and at the same time gave a stamp of approval to the young people who were watching? So that takes me to current times. We have quite a bit going on still in Fort Wayne. We're going to have a summer of simmering, if I will, if I can identify it like that. But Homestead High School brought to light the fact that it is truly something that still goes on in our own community. And for a young girl to feel that she should depict herself in blackface in mockery of some other negativity of culture or an experience that she may have had that was not as serious or possibly very serious, but she brought a bad taste from history to the forefront. And here we are in Fort Wayne having to face it again out loud and explain it intimately, house by house, so that it doesn't continue to fester into another generation, much less a century. That's my brief history look at blackface. It is insulting, it's degrading, and to me, it shortchanges the entire, shall we say, neighborhood and the city if we don't know how to communicate respectfully and properly to each other, owning our own cultures as being awesome for each and every last one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. Thank you, Roberta. We appreciate that overview. And as you can see, it got pretty quiet in here because these are sensitive topics, serious things that we want to learn about, but that we also want to talk about and feel free to express ourselves, whatever side of the coin you're on. So our next topic is going to be presented by none other than Quentin Ellis. And so Quentin is going to talk about mass incarceration. He's going to share some statistics with you, some data to shed light on a broader perspective, to give a broader perspective of how mass incarceration is a racial issue. Some of us never probably thought of it like that. But Quentin is a criminal defense attorney, and he does a lot of other things in his practice as well. For 3 decades, in Fort Wayne. Aside from criminal law, he also has practiced in the areas of civil rights, employment, housing, education, and public accommodation. He has served various roles in community leadership, including a term on the city's Economic Development Commission and as a former attorney and board member for Fort Wayne's Metropolitan Human Relations Commission. He is a member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity and is committed to community service. Quentin, can you make your way up here, please? We're going to use the pointer. Okay.
No applause? I mean, Roberta got applause. I mean, can I get a little bit? Thank you. And thank you for including me in this endeavor, Sharon. Mass incarceration. When I was summoned to speak about this, I thought I was just going to do a snapshot of, as it says, I believe, recent trends, criminal justice trends, recent trends in the incarceration rates in America. And I'll do that. And keep in mind the rates for Fort Wayne, for Indiana, sort of track parallel the national rates. I think the only stat in terms of slides that I was able to find dealt with Indiana. Nothing specific on Fort Wayne, but I am aware of some of the rates dealing with the local jail, just based upon the fact that that has been in the media, which, again, I will get to. But the interesting thing for me when I started doing research on the topic was typically when we do this, attorneys and historians, the starting point for talking about mass incarceration is with the 13th Amendment and the freeing of the slaves and what happened thereafter. But this time, for some reason, in my research, I was led to some data relevant to the issue of incarceration of black people during slavery and leading up to the late 1800s. And I guess if you think about it, it was sort of counterintuitive, I guess, to learn that there were no prisons to speak of in America up through the early mid-1800s. The issue of blacks and criminality was dealt with by the plantation owners themselves. If they saw fit, or whether, again, punishment was justified or not, they dealt with the issue of criminal conduct or misconduct by slaves. There were some blacks that were incarcerated during that time period. Usually had to be for pretty serious things such as rebellion or very serious crimes, is when the state or localities got involved in the punishment, in crime and punishment issues. The thing that was interesting to find out, though, was that black men and women were incarcerated together during that time period. And they were, shall we say, encouraged to reproduce. And the children were automatically wards of the state. And up until they were 10 years old, the mother was allowed or required to raise the child until 10, and thereafter, the child was sold into slavery. They were auctioned off to the local plantation owners. Often the prison, the upper echelon of the prison officials themselves would do the bidding and buying of these children. This takes us through the, again, early mid-1800s. Around the middle 1800s is when the crime rates, or the incarceration rates, I should say, started to rise significantly, and states began to get involved in the incarceration of citizens, again, predominantly black citizens. By the time of the passage of the 13th Amendment and the glaring hole in it, loophole, we should say, when we think of the 13th Amendment as freeing the slaves, there was that exception for imprisonment. If you were imprisoned, then you could be contracted out to plantation owners, and as most of you know, black people were contracted out to plantation owners and other business owners, and essentially continued into slavery, and in large numbers. So that was the beginning of the real mass incarceration era, because by the time 1870 hit, 95% of people incarcerated were black. 95% of the people in America who were incarcerated were black. And as you again know, there were various mechanisms employed to accomplish this. We had the black codes, the criminalization of conduct such as vagrancy, being out at night, too many assembling, et cetera, et cetera. Those were just essentially ploys utilized to, again, incarcerate blacks so that they can be contracted out for labor. Thereafter, through the early 1900s, the data goes something like, and again, I'll get to the more recent data, but by the 1970s, there were 186,000 people incarcerated in America. By 1985, 481,000. By 2008, there were 1.6 million people incarcerated in America. And again, that 2008-2009 time period is sort of the inflection point. Thereafter, and since that time, incarceration rates have actually started to decline. But as you can see, in terms of globally, the United States incarcerates more people than any other country by a lot. And we don't incarcerate more people on a yearly basis, I discovered. This was an interesting data point. I don't think there's in any of the slides I found. It was in some of the material. There are countries that incarcerate more people than we do on a yearly basis, but our numbers are so high because we incarcerate people longer than any other country, and we attach things, restrictions at the end of their sentences that cause them to go back to prison more so than any other country. And other things such as the three-strike laws, habitual offender laws, as we refer to them here in Indiana, contributes to our incarceration rates being elevated over time. This slide does a breakdown by race. As you can see, just in terms of the numbers, and again, on a state-by-state breakdown by race, blacks are overrepresented in the prison populations per 100,000 residents. I think this is one where, the surprising thing here was that Wisconsin, in terms on a per capita basis, incarcerates more people than any other state in the union. I may have skipped one. Looks like I didn't. And yeah, these states here listed when the per capita incarceration rates per 100,000 residents. Indiana here, that's where we are in terms of, again, the racial breakdown in the Indiana prisons. We are at just under 1,500 people, and this stat is as of October 13, 2021. This data deals with this disparity among Black and white incarceration rates across the nation, and it's color coded. The darker the shade is, the higher the disparity is by state. So you can see Indiana. I mean, we're not one of the lighter shades, but we're not one of the darker shades either. But the surprising thing here was that some of the southern states are the lighter shades. I think I've jumped all the way to Chris's presentation. But before I relinquish the podium, recent trends. The fact that our political leaders, the sheriff, county council, have been ordered to build a new jail, it has been in the media. And a lot of people think that that's because there were too many Blacks incarcerated. That's not true. It's just too many people, period, incarcerated. Is there likewise, though, an overrepresentation of Blacks in our jail? It is. It is. And we can segue into, subtopics that deal with that. I mean, there are issues that have been around, again, nationwide for decades, starting with the over-policing in marginalized communities that occurs, and all the things related to that, profiling, et cetera. We have an overrepresentation of Blacks in our jail. But again, you have to consider the fact that some of the things that led to that, like the crack cocaine epidemic, which led to the 1991 crime bill, which led to, again, an explosion in just the raw numbers of people incarcerated, particularly minority people. At the same time, during that time period, the Black Conference of Mayors were supportive of the crime bill back in 1991 because of what the crack cocaine epidemic was doing to the communities. About 60% of Black people, generally speaking, supported it, et cetera. My good buddy Payne Brown, who was Mayor Humke's public safety director at the same time, spearheaded the move of the police department headquarters, if you all recall. It was on Creighton Street for a while, just because of what was occurring in that part of town. But again, the end result was a significant increase in the numbers of African Americans incarcerated, even here locally, as we saw on a national basis. But again, the good news is, and I didn't give Sharon that slide, but as of 2008, 2009, there's been a steady decrease nationwide in the raw numbers of people incarcerated in America, including minorities. But again, the percentages and the ratios are still roughly the same. With our jail, once the edict was given by the federal judge to decrease the population while the planning is being made for the construction of the new jail, we've gone from around 900 plus people incarcerated in our local jail, which was, I think, built to only house around 700. The numbers, ironically, have decreased by 300 or 400 to that level, which leads some of us criminal defense lawyers to say, aha, I mean, if you could get an order from a judge saying decrease the numbers of people in your jail, then magically those numbers decrease. They were overinflated, and there were people who were in that jail that should not have been in the jail. Nonetheless, the judges have implemented problem-solving courts as well to try and make sure that the people in the jail are people who, again, should be in the jail from a prosecutorial and judicial perspective. I'm not saying as a criminal defense lawyer I would agree with those analyses, but in any event, we have the drug court now, we have veteran courts, we have OVWI court. All of these courts are focused on the rehabilitation of people arrested for mostly nonviolent crimes. Even now, the prosecutor's office and the courts have opened up a drug court, things like pretrial diversion, to people who may have committed a little more violent crime that didn't end up in any significant injuries, of course, to some of those programs that often end in dismissal of charges. So hats off in that regard. There's progress being made in that regard, but we still need to tackle issues within our community, largely speaking, and within our community relevant to what's behind the increased incarceration rates for particularly our young black men. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sharon.
Thank you, Quentin, for that enlightening information. Do you have the pointer? Okay, he forwarded that for me. Thank you. I bet there was a lot that you didn't know. The men and the women in the prisons together and the babies and all of, who knew that? Who knew that? But that is, okay, one person knew it. But, these are the types of things that we learn and that will give us broader and deeper perspective when we form our own opinions about the issues that are coming up in our community. Okay, so our last speaker is Chris Lahr, now a good friend of mine, I consider him to be. Chris is the chair of the Calhoun Project for the Martin Luther King Jr. Club. In his role, he educates residents about the history of John Calhoun in hopes of gaining support to change the name of Calhoun Street to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. He is co-author of the book Playing for the City and has written blogs for various websites about race and white privilege. By day, Chris is the community education coordinator for Alive Community Outreach, which strives to alleviate violence in Fort Wayne. Come on up here, Chris. Come on. Come on up here. So, welcome Chris to the stage. Give him a hand.
Is everybody still awake? We still good? How many here have very little knowledge of who John Calhoun is? Raise your hand. Wow, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. So you're probably like, oh, this is going to be boring. Check this out. That is John Calhoun. You see that? That's cool. Anyway, John Calhoun was America's 7th vice president. Calhoun owned dozens of slaves during his lifetime. Calhoun once referred to slavery as a positive good. Another place he said it was a blessing. And on the floor of the U.S. Senate, additionally, Calhoun supported and co-authored the Indian Removal Act. This legislation forced American Indians from their homes at gunpoint, resulting in thousands of deaths on the Trail of Tears. A busy Fort Wayne street is named Calhoun. Now, a lot of people may say he was a product of his time, but he was radical for his time. He was a man who was not only had slavery, but he said it was a positive good. And now, I found out about the project just a little over a year ago. It's been going on a couple years. And part of what we need to do is if we get 60% of the owners on Calhoun Street to go for it and be cool with it, then all of a sudden we will have a Martin Luther King Boulevard. All right, here's the update of where we are. So far, we have about 1,000 online signatures, okay, which is cool, which we'll put one up. You can join that. We have about almost 300 signatures of people that don't live on Calhoun Street. And we have 70 owners so far, which is about 66% of the people we've done. We need to get 60, we're about 66%. And 36% of the people said no. And so we need to be about of 388, we need to get about 233 signatures of landowners. And it's hard because we're at a point now where we have business owners and we have folks that are landlords that live in wherever, Dakota or something, you know, so it's hard to get a hold of some of them. Some of the things that have been interesting walking up and down Calhoun Street, we get some interesting feedback, right? So sometimes people are excited. They're just like, oh, yes, yeah, where do I sign? And they want to sign up immediately. You know, we've been to shows, and I remember this one guy came up, old white guy with a bandana on his head, come up, and he was like, hey, where do I sign up? I need to sign up because I am a history buff, and I know history, and this guy was a bad dude, and I can't believe we have a street named after him. And then we have other people that said, we already have a bridge. And now they'll probably say, I can't wait till we go out and they say, we're going to have the pillars now. How many here has heard of ChatGPT? I put in ChatGPT the other day and I said, how many streets are named after a man named Matt Anthony Wayne? 25 streets. Anthony Wayne, Wayne Street, Wayne Trace, Wayne Dale. So we have a precedence for having something named more than once for people, right? And so Anthony Wayne Bank, Wayne's Automotive. We've all watched Wayne's World. I mean, come on, there's all kinds of Waynes, right? I want us to think about something. For if racial healing is to ever come to our society, it will mean remembering and retelling the story of racial injustice and honoring the voices and actions of those who stood against it. James Cone. History matters. And I want us to talk a minute about culture. All right? There's a book out called Reparations by Duke Kwon and Gregory Thompson. And I love their definition of racism. It helps me out. It says, racism is best understood culturally as a force that shapes the entire ecosystem of meanings, values, ideas, institutions, and practices of American culture. Seeing racism in this way as embedded in an entire cultural order is important, not only because it reminds us of each other, reminds each of us simply by virtue of living in the culture, it is implicated in and affected by the reality of American racism, but also because it reminds us just how expansive the work of repairing racism ultimately will be. Culture is like water to a fish. The water, a fish doesn't even know water exists to win. Flopping up on the boat going, crap, I can't breathe, you know? It's the same way. When you have racism rooted in culture, there's things that happen in our lives that we don't even see. And there's, and it's easy as a white person to say, well, I don't hate black folks. I'm not racist. I don't have slaves. I never had any of this stuff. And in reality, we need to stop saying, try to identify who the racists are and who's not. But we need to begin to ask ourselves, we are all affected by racism. We've all been affected by racism. So I remember one of the guys that we met on the streets, he looked at me with a snarl in his face. And I couldn't tell if it was a snarl or a smile. Because he's kind of an older guy, and I said, hey, I'm with Martin Luther King Club. That's the worst club ever. And I thought, he must be in the Martin Luther King Club. He's joking with me. And then he said, Martin Luther is an a-hole. Then I started looking for the camera, so I was on Candid Camera or something. I thought Benny was pulling a joke on me. And he slammed the door. And I started thinking about it. It's easy to point out racists and things like that, but we've all been affected by racism. And racism still exists in Fort Wayne today. There's still segregation that still exists today. There's still poverty that exists. And so by doing this project, this is about pulling ourselves out of the water and looking at the things that created the culture of racism that exists and still has impact in our society today. And that's why changing the name is not going to end racism, but telling the story is going to help lead us down that way and help us do something different. So let me tell a little bit of the story before I run out of time and get kicked off the stage. 1824 was the first plat. This is the first streets that were laid in Fort Wayne by John Barr and McCormick. And 3 of the streets going north and south with Clinton, Calhoun, and Barr. In 1824, guess what? People knew who Calhoun was. People knew who Calhoun was. He was a man that believed that white people were superior. He believed that whites were different and better than BIPOC. Slavery was positive and a blessing. Blacks were intellectually inferior. Ours is the government of the white man. Native Americans' way of life was inferior to the white man's, and they must assimilate. This was the people knew this of John Calhoun, and they named the street after him. And so at that time, it really wasn't much of a dividing line. There wasn't a whole lot of black folk here in 1824. Roberta Ridley can break this all down, but this is kind of a real brief history of some of the black population. 1700s were the earliest black folks here, and they were slaves. They were part of the French and English that came in as traders, and they had slaves, and there were slaves right here in Fort Wayne. And then you heard of William Wells, right? Wells Corridor? We had some slaves on Wells Corridor, and he owned it. And there's a whole story there, and I don't have time to go into it. The first free black man was in 1812. Philip Freeman was a bake man. And so, but I want to introduce people to this man named Isaac McCoy. He's a white man. He was a missionary. And actually there is a monument to him on Fairfield at the Baptist church. And he was a Baptist missionary. And he sacrificed so much to the Indians. But in reality, he saw the Indians and the native people less than. And he said that they can't live with the white man and they must be assimilated. And he started a school actually, and had a black student, so they raised that up. He was for black folk, but in reality, he said the black folk would be better off if they went back to Africa. And so it was about segregation. It was about how can I save you by assimilating you into my culture. And so that's what Isaac McCoy, and in fact, Isaac McCoy was the one who really was one of the brainchilds of the Indian Removal Act. And he went to Washington, D.C. and met with this man named John C. Calhoun. And John C. Calhoun jumped on board and said, I like that idea. It made it happen. Calhoun has become a dividing line in our city. These are modern stats. This is the 02, 46802, 03, 07, 06. Calhoun's a straight line right up the middle. And you can see the 03 is the poorest, the most economically challenged neighborhood in the city. 40% black, 39% white, 27,000 average family incomes. And if you look at the top 10 violent neighborhoods in the community, they had number 1, 2, 4, and 8. On the other side of the street, 19% black, 67%, 40%, 40,000 average income. They had this number 5 and number 9 violent neighborhoods. You go down to the 06, 52%. So the majority of the black population is in the 03 and 06 in Fort Wayne. And they also are some of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. And they have the violent neighborhoods of 3, 4, 6, 7, and 10. Whereas the 07, 53%, and you see the stats. But what's interesting is that dividing line. Did you ever notice Southside High School? Anybody know what side of the street it's on? It's on the 06 side, right? But it has a 07 zip code. So they literally drew a zip code around Southside and made it 07 when a bunch of white dudes were going there. Interesting, right? These are some things, the dividing lines in our city that we don't talk about that still exist today. There's still economics. And part of the reason why these are there is because of redlining. We don't have time to go into that, but I have a whole bunch of stack of stuff on redlining in the back on our table. And a whole bunch of stuff, and this is the D4. There's 6 sections that were redlined. D4 was one of them. That's where the 03 is, right? And that's where the African American Museum is and all the surrounding areas. But what I love about this city is though there's been segregation and stuff, there's always been people fighting for justice. Always been people doing, white and black, working together, fighting for justice. And the Green, look no further than the Green Book. The Green Book was written it's called the Negro Motorist Green Book. It was written so people who were black could travel freely and knew where to stop, where to have hotels and restaurants and things like that. There's actually 11 different spots in Fort Wayne that were in the Green Book because we were segregated and people couldn't eat in certain places. And so, here we go. The project is about changing the new narrative. It's more than just a name. It's more than just a street. We need more than just 60% of the people. It's about all of us. Changing the narrative to represent who we are as Fort Waynians. That we no longer want this segregation and the disparities that exist, but we want equality. Thank you.
Awesome. So I know that people learned something about that, right? Because we don't all know a lot about that. So I want, we're going to begin our Q&A portion, and so I want the members of the panel to come on up stage and have a seat here, because we're going to start asking some questions. And each of you will get a chance, well, not each of you, but you'll get a chance to ask some questions and to do some comments around these topics that we are discussing tonight. So we wanted to leave quite a bit of time for this. Oh, there's a clock right here. Thank you. We wanted to leave quite a bit of time for the Q&A. So this is how we're going to do this. We have microphones on each side of the room. And so we have some trusty volunteers here. There's Cassius over there, there's Heather over there. And if you have a comment that you would like to make, they will come to you and allow you to speak in the microphone. If you're shy, or if you don't want to stand up and say your question or comment, you should have received an index card when you came, so that you can write your question or comment on the index card. And then one of our trusty volunteers or staff members will bring the index card to me, and I will read that aloud. Do we get the rules of the game here? And so what we want to do is we want to be respectful, obviously, of one another's ideas, of one another's perspectives. We also want to be real, and we want to be expressive about some of the things that were said here tonight. We know that not everybody agrees with some of the perspectives that were presented. We might not all agree with one another. So it's not necessarily about agreement right now. It's about hearing one another out and educating ourselves and learning from one another. We got that? Okay, we're kind of solemn in here tonight because, and that's what happens when we're talking about such a difficult subject matter, okay? We get kind of quiet. And I heard Chris, when you were talking about the Calhoun Street, you didn't get that many claps. Did you hear that? It was like a spattering.
I heard boos. I don't know what the heck.
But that's all to say that we know that there are different that there are different perspectives in the room, okay? And that's okay, but we want to hear one another out. We have a thing right here, okay? Okay, so I'm going to save this question. And it's not a bad question, it's a wonderful question. And so I want you all to get, we have people at the mics already. I thought I was going to have to warm you guys up. Okay, so here's what I'm going to ask. Real quick, I want to ask a couple of questions real quick to get the juices flowing so I can get a steady flow of questions. We got Audrey over there. We got this question right here. I want to know from anyone on the panel, Roberta, this is your subject matter. How can we begin to heal from the blackface matter, from the blackface issue? Even with the young woman at Homestead High School who obviously made what many of us would say is a mistake. How can we begin to heal from that and embrace even her? Because there are some people ignorant of the impact of doing something like that, especially young people. How could we begin to heal?
Obviously, from a Christian perspective, you know, we always look at the word forgive. Mm-hmm. She deserves to be forgiven because we all suffer from a lack of knowledge in various capacities. If she did what she did, thinking it was something humorous or entertaining, or that possibly was even going to be accepted, it truly was a mistake for her to think that way. Mm-hmm. But I think she needs to be involved in a conversation with people to find out what she was thinking. And the conversation needs to be held within the walls of homes, those that feel that she was wrong as well as those who feel that she was right. Have a conversation about why she thought she was right, why you feel that it was wrong, and to really, shall we say, shake the shaft from the rice, to know what this young lady was thinking and those who support her. Where did she get the idea that she thought that she could do something like that and there wouldn't be repercussions from it? And is a violent reaction, fighting, or more name-calling the way to solve the problem? It is not. It is not. A conversation such as what we hope to have here tonight is what needs to be had, and to get an understanding about what's going on in somebody's head when they think that they can be that insulting.
That leads to this question on the index card, which is asking you, Roberta, has anyone from Homestead High School reached out to you to educate students about blackface?
They have not.
Okay. All right. All right. Anyone else want to touch on that question real quick before we move on?
I don't know. I mean, I grew up in Huntington, Indiana.
It's not quiet anymore, is it? It's not
I have a picture of me at the age of 12 with blackface, dressed up for Halloween. And today I'm here. Been on a journey.
Been on a journey.
They're still on a journey. We don't ever arrive. See, that's the problem with white folks. We think, oh, I've arrived. I don't feel hatred towards somebody. But it was about the journey that we've got to be on. And so I'd love to talk to the young lady about the journey. And I think, you know, I have grace for folks like that and like white folk around here that were just like me. Have no relationships. We got to build authentic relationships and build bridges towards folks. That's how it's been.
What do you think compelled you to do blackface at that time? Do you remember what
Yes.
you were thinking?
Michael Jackson's album came out. I dressed up like Michael Jackson, but I was absolutely looked nothing like him.
So it was ignorance.
Absolute ignorance. And the thing was, I don't remember anybody thinking anything bad about it.
It was ignorance of the impact that something like that could have.
Yep. And,
In
and
society.
it was just all white folk around. in
I was gonna
Huntington.
say, where were you?
There
You were
was
in
nobody being offended in Huntington, you know? So that's, yeah, so everybody's on a journey.
Yeah.
Awesome. We have a question over here, and she's been standing up.
I just wanted to, first off, thank you all for creating this environment here in Fort Wayne at the time that you did, right before Juneteenth, right before all sorts of, you know, landmark kind of historical moments. You know, I'm not at all forgetting that, like, just over 2 years ago, or maybe now just under 3 years ago, we had the releasing of rubber bullets and tear gas on protesters downtown. When we had our Black Lives Matter movement on full display here in Fort Wayne. I just wanted to ask Quentin Ellis a clarification point, because I think it's very important. As a criminal justice attorney, how has this been for you? I'm assuming you're from Fort Wayne. How has this been for you in this conversation leading into whether or not the county needs to build a new jail? And also, just a note for clarification that the judge has never ordered our county commissioners to build a new jail. That was just a requirement for them to make good on their the litigation before them. So it's not a requirement by any means, but it's definitely got momentum. So just wondering what your perspective on that is.
Second part of that question or comment first. The way I see it, the way the judge has kind of boxed the commissioners and county officials into where they have little but no other choice than to build a new jail. I think that's why I couched it in the terms I did. Me personally, what are my thoughts on whether or not a new jail is necessary or required? I go to that jail on a regular basis to visit clients. I was there yesterday morning. I believe that jail was obsolete when the doors opened. Even I wasn't practicing when the newest, when the oldest part of the current structure opened. I started in '91, shortly afterwards, and it's been expanded twice since that time. I was around for both, for the opening or completion of both expansions, and I believe those portions were obsolete when they were commissioned or opened. I believe that the current structure does not suit the purposes. There's no room really for educational programming, rehabilitation. If you paid attention to the recent sheriff's race, both candidates talked about the desire to be able to implement drug and alcohol classes within the jail and other programming that the current structure just will not allow. So as an advocate for people who are often housed in that jail because they are held no bond or cannot make bond, I'm all for tearing that one down and building a new one that will even facilitate us going in to visit our clients. We have to call ahead now because there are only 2 rooms in the entire jail for probably 50-odd criminal defense lawyers who do this on a routine basis to go and visit our clients. And it's tricky getting in there when we have the opportunity on our calendars to get in. Now, the last sheriff, Gladio, did implement video conferencing that we can now do with our clients, but that's been replete with problems, connection issues and other issues to where it really doesn't work. So I'm excited to see some plans being made, and hopefully all the players or participants will be included in the discussion so that when they do complete the new structure, it's workable for everyone involved. It meets the sheriff's needs in terms of programming for people so that we are doing less recycling of people, meaning arrest, conviction, sentence, conviction, and rearrest, that there's additional programming while they're awaiting disposition of their cases, and it's easier for people to get in and conduct those courses, classes, programming, and for us to see our clients.
Thank you, Quentin. We have another question.
This is directed to Dr. Ellis. It's in 2 parts. I noticed on that map, and like you said, Wisconsin has the highest incarceration rate. I was wondering if you have any theory on why that is.
That's per 100,000 people. I would have to visit Milwaukee and probably Green Bay and Racine, some of the population centers with significant African-American populations, and ask around. I would imagine that's why that number is what it is, because again, you looked at the number of the disparity as well as the number of African-Americans, raw numbers incarcerated there. It does point to, again, over-incarceration, I believe, of African-Americans. But the phenomena behind it, I can't speak to it with any certainty because I don't practice there. Each jurisdiction is going to be a little different in the reasons behind certain data are going to be slightly different, I think.
Okay, and the other thing is, could you tell me the difference between the term of incarceration for going to jail versus prison. How long do you have to be in jail versus, I know prison is long-term, but what's the amount of time for just being in jail?
Typically, the jail is a pre-detention facility. I say typically. The exception is for misdemeanors, and with the change in the Indiana criminal justice statute in 2014, 2015, level 6 felonies are now housed in the jail as a sentence. If you're sentenced on a misdemeanor, you're sentenced to the Allen County Jail. And that misdemeanors carry less than 1 year. Typically, we have C misdemeanors up to 60 days, B misdemeanors up to 180 days, A misdemeanors up to 1 year. Whereas our felonies start at 2.5 years. The law just changed again because all of the counties were complaining again. That did contribute to the overcrowding of county jails around the state, Allen County included, when they changed the law to mandate that level 6 felons also serve their sentences in the Allen County Jail. You could only get to prison or one of the DOC facilities if you had a level 6 felony plus a probation revocation or more than one felony sentence, which aggregated more than 2 years to get to the DOC. So that recently changed. More level 6 felons are going to prison because, again, of the overcrowding that was occurring at the county level across the state.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. I see we have another question over here. And if you have, again, any questions on your index card that you want to submit, please just hold those up high. We have over here, we have Dr. Benny Edwards. I said doctor. I don't know if it is doctor.
Benny Edwards. I'm the president of the Martin Luther King Club here in Fort Wayne. We've been here for 37 years. And Chris and I walked Calhoun Street together many days. And I remember the incident that he was specifically talking about, that the gentleman said Martin Luther King was an a-hole and he didn't want us on his porch. But one of the things I learned, Chris, you want to expand on that and tell us a little bit about what we've done on Calhoun and how many days we walked the streets, and I guess the diversity has changed on Calhoun tremendously.
Yes.
I grew up in Fort Wayne. I never knew who John Calhoun was and who the street was named after, and why, after I learned who Calhoun was, we should not be honoring one of the most important and the main streets in Fort Wayne after such a person as John Calhoun. Chris, if you could expand on that, please.
Yeah, so one of the things we've done is we kind of drove up and down Calhoun Street and split it up into 29 sections. And we just take section by sections, and we might do 2 or 3 sections in a day. And we started last summer is when we started hitting the streets. And so we went I think it was Tuesday at 5. And we would just go for a couple hours and just go door to door to door to door to door. And it was great. I mean, it's a great way to meet people. And I think, like you said, Benny was surprised at how diverse it is now, because it used to be a lot more white right around there. Yeah, so right now we've gone through it a couple times already, and we've done pretty well. I think now we're running into a lot of landlords that's not around, and even though the people that are living there are like, hey, yeah, we want to do this, and we're also strategizing to get some of the businesses, because it's hard to just when there's a long line to say, hey, sign our petition, so it's just some of the strategy with that. And so we're just gearing up to start hitting the streets again. So if you're interested, you can talk to us afterwards. We might actually split up some of the sections. You might get section 12 and they give you the names and all that, and you can kind of go in your own space and stuff like that. But we need to get creative, and I can also show the list of names names and addresses and stuff like that. And if you are maybe somebody that lives at Calhoun Street, or maybe knows somebody that is on Calhoun Street and could help us get the name out, or knows some of the businesses, it's a community affair. I mean, it really is. And I think when we understand the reasoning behind why we do what we do, so many people say, well, you're erasing history. Man, you didn't know Calhoun was. I'm a history teller. right? We're telling history, and we got to be able to lean into history and tell the history, the good, the bad, the ugly, so that we can be, and my hope is that by the end of this, everybody in Fort Wayne knows who Calhoun is, what he was about, and there's a picture of him and all the residents and all you people that signed a petition right next to this sign that said Calhoun and Martin Luther King, and we're the ones that brought change to the city. We're the ones at the forefront to change the narrative.
Okay, Chris, we have a follow-up question from an index card. What are the next steps? What should people do, should citizens do to complete or act on if they do not live on Calhoun Street?
Right. So, I mean, the online petition's easy. Like, we have a hard copy one, you can do it back. So that's the one thing you can do. But others, talk to us about volunteering. And we're going to start getting, times where we go weekly again. And then also, if you know connections, if you know somebody that's on the street, somebody that owns a business, I'll give you a petition. Go talk to them for us, and we work together on that.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from this side of the room.
Hi, thank you all. This is a great presentation. I'm really happy that I had the opportunity to come. I love the title, History Heals, but I also am really keenly aware right now that history hurts. Like when you start realizing what has happened and how we got to where we are and how people allowed that to take place, and that's the consequence that we face. So I'm actually making a comment, but it does lead to a question. In terms of what happened at Homestead, I think it's really important to understand that the students there did not protest because of what the young woman did. They protested because the administration of the school did not handle it correctly.
That's true.
And the administration of the school actually handled it in a way that led to violence. They forced students into a room, did not control the environment, and then allowed other students to come in, and from what I've heard, I was not there, use racial epithets that caused the violence. And the accountability for what happened that day is not anywhere near happening. In fact, I feel that the way that things have been handled is repressing families and students from speaking out about injustices that have been going on for a long time. I'm representing a young man who was expelled from school in that time period, and the history that I'm talking about that hurts is the history of our school systems and how students do not have the same level of rights that we would expect anyone in our country to have. So they can be expelled for the smallest of things, misunderstood on purpose, and then used to silence other people. So my question is, as a community, how do we protect the people that are trying to call attention to injustice? And how do we hold accountable our officials who are allowing injustice to happen? I realize that's a big question, but any insight that you might have would be helpful.
Well, since we're talking Homestead, I'll take lead on that. It can easily be said that she is not the catalyst for the violence that came from her actions. To me, she clearly was not aware of the impact that it could have. But it only takes one person to see something like that, be offended by it, share it with others who are equally offended, and want to have some justice for this wrong that was put out without any knowledge of the impact that it would have. That's one point. For the administration to sweep it under the rug, so to speak, I mean, they had to come forward and speak to the situation, and I thought it was very, my personal opinion, okay? I thought it was, how do I want to say, kind of mamby-pamby. They skirted the facts. that were there and the impact that it had on the people that it affected. And they did try to make it appear as though it wasn't quite that serious. But if you're me and you say that and you depict yourself like you're looking like me and speaking negatively, ignorantly, uneducated, or irresponsibly, I'm offended. I am offended. I am offended for all women who look like me, for all men who look like me, and whether she was responsible for all of the violence that came. Well, nobody made another person hit another person or call another person a worse name or than what she may or may not have said, but that's the beginning. The schools, to get to the real core of what you're stating, well, in my opinion, they're not teaching like they should teach anyway, most of them. And I've had this opinion for a very long time. If you're teaching people, young people, to grow up and be responsible, then you can't keep teaching them that they can get away with whatever they want to get away with just because they're expressing themselves. You can't do it. It doesn't work. Evidence of what happened with this young lady. Evidence of many, many, many other things that have happened throughout the Fort Wayne community schools and community schools throughout America. You cannot feel that it is all right to degrade, insult, hurt, and demean other people because you have a right to speak your mind.
Roberta, I want to just interject here, just to ask a question. Is there anyone here from the school district? And I believe that was Southwest Allen County Schools?
It was Homestead.
Southwest Allen County.
Southwest, okay, yeah.
So is there someone here from that school district? Okay, do you have some input, or we have a couple people about that? I know that the incident, the blackface, sparked some protests, and I believe many of the students protested peacefully within the school. Are there any opinions about that? Is there anyone from administration who can talk about that? Because what we're saying, we know from news reports, but not firsthand. Anyone want to talk about that who actually lives in that district? If you could wait for a mic.
Roberta just told you what is it. It's been swept under the rug.
Okay.
They let them come all into one auditorium, let somebody get up front and talk, and called that letting them air it out. And now they're not doing anything about it. Okay. I just had a senior graduate from that this year. He was one of them they brought in as a leader to try and talk and calm the people. While he's up there calming and his other friends, a fight breaks out in the back. So it's not calm, and they did not handle it, and that's not good.
Okay.
I want to add to what she just said. I do have a very close, very, very close friend whose granddaughter was involved in the upheaval there at the school, who was very emotionally traumatized by things that other students said to her about how insignificant it was, and that she was just being emotional because she knew how to be emotional, when in fact she had felt like she belonged where she was in the school until this incident happened. And then other people who are not this young lady began to openly express their criticism and judgment of other African American students simply because they thought they were better, and they said it. They said it to her. She was an emotional wreck because it was coming from people that she thought liked her and were friendly with her, that she thought were friends. It's something that has to be worked on within the administration, the teachers in the front of the room and house by house. It's not good. That's all there is to it. You
So I
cannot-
think what we can see from this input is that there is a need for constructive expression.
Exactly.
If I can make that up.
Exactly.
So that there's this need for people when we are expressing ourselves to have dignity and respect for those who are in the audience, and that especially when we're dealing with youth and young people,
Yes.
that we need to have some grown-ups in the room who are able to maneuver the conversation. We do have a number of other people standing up, so I want to get to those people. Well, Bishop, I saw you, but I see this woman over here, and I think she's been standing for quite a while.
Hi, my name's Molly Rayo. I am very active in our community. One of my biggest focuses is suicide prevention and mental health awareness. And I think a lot of this has a lot to do with that, even though that's not necessarily why I came up to speak. But to give you a little bit about my background, I grew up in Somerville, South Carolina, right outside of Charleston. I went to a middle school that was very diverse, and I was the white girl who was friends with everybody. My parents would keep me home on days that we knew that riots were going to happen, because even though it was a very diverse school, there was still a lot of controversy there. We moved here to Indiana a month into my freshman year of high school, and I've dated white and black men all throughout my life, but I've also been called a racist on numerous occasions, and I've never quite understood that, because I'm one of the most open-minded people. And I'm one of those people that want to welcome everybody with open arms. And it's frustrating because I've gotten that label as a racist. And I've never felt that I was racist. So I'm grateful for this opportunity to come and educate myself on the Black history, because I want to have a better understanding. So, because for me, like the other lady that brought up the Black Lives Matter and the riots and the protesting about George Floyd, like for me, as a white woman, I didn't see it as a race thing. I saw it as an abuse of power, and that's how I saw it. And some of my black friends were mad at me for looking at it in that perspective, because to me, it shouldn't matter if it was a woman, a man, the skin color, the background, you know what I mean? Because so many of us are ridiculed. I'm ridiculed as a white woman who is big, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying that's the same thing by any means, please don't take it that way, but like for me, I wanna have more of an understanding so that I don't get called a racist, because that's the last thing I would ever want to be considered as, because I embrace all, if that makes sense, so.
I understand what you're saying, and I think that it feeds into exactly why we are all here today. You had a curiosity, you had a statement, you wanted an answer to what's going to happen next, or what can we do to move forward from where we are still today, from the blackface of 1828. Excuse me. I think it's important to understand that the labels that are out there, if somebody called you racist, whether you were aware of it or not, and I'm not saying it happened, it could have been an action or a statement pertaining to a situation at hand that they felt was a white perspective on what was happening, which made them think you really didn't understand what was going on. Doesn't make it right, okay? Doesn't make it right. But it's conversation open like this that helps to understand. If that person was able to explain to you why they felt what you said or what your behavior was that was racist, then maybe they would have heard in their own head their incorrectness, if you will, perhaps. But if you don't have a conversation about it, I mean, nobody's going to label me something You know, I mean, it happens within culture groups. It happens within culture groups. And I will use this example. I am a fifth generation African American in this community. And when I lived in a very diverse cultural neighborhood growing up. Anybody that knows Fort Wayne? I was born at 448 Dahlman, but I grew up at 522 Buchanan, and everybody in the neighborhood was either going to Central High School or Central Catholic. I went to Concordia. I got a label, and I mean it was a red, shiny, flashing label. They thought, you think you too good? How come you don't go to Central? And to this day, and I'm not, people say, why you talk like you talk? You talk like you're a white girl. You know, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. My daddy taught me how to talk. You're a black man. My mom was black.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you get the same thing.
I think that's something that many of us have experienced. And I want to also say to you, ma'am, thank you so much for your vulnerability in standing up and saying that, because I know that many people have experienced that, and they wouldn't get up and say it in this diverse forum. So thank you very much for that. And I think that that is something that we need to look at from both sides, people of color and white Americans. Is it, because so often we look at actions, but is racism a matter of the actions and behavior, or is it a matter of the heart? I don't know the answer to that question. And if we say that it's a matter of the heart, then maybe we can't read people's hearts. We can't read people's intentions. And so you're very vulnerable, and that's not your heart, but maybe the actions said something different to some people. I don't know if it would have said the same thing to all people. But we've got a number of people standing up, and so I'm going to go ahead
I want to
and
call
go to some of
something
these
out
other
here.
folks.
The word racism and the word race. You really give that some thought and do some study on it. I have used this example many, many times on many, many presentations that I've done. Race is not something that you find in the Bible. It was added in so-called language use with the beginning of slave trade. There is no culture called race, okay? It was a monetary thing. It was a monetary thing in order to enslave people, to put people in bondage, be it servitude, indentured servitude, or what. So think about that.
Think about it, and we're going to go on to some of these other questions. Hold on, Chris. Hold on, because we got people standing up. And they've been standing up for a while. Like we said, you're not going to get all of the answers tonight, and so that is why we wanted to spark some interest and some desire to learn things on your own and to go further. Yes, I think that's Nathan.
Yeah, hi, my name's Nathan, and I quickly just want to recognize Mrs. Ridley and the work that she has done with the Concordia Alumni Association, the black alumni there. So I'm a former teacher at Concordia, and there is this amazing group called BLAST that she has been a driving force for, and that has helped start to make change that has been necessary for a long time. I don't teach there anymore, but I saw those issues, and I'm still connected with some of those students, and the work that the Alumni Association has done has been incredible. And when we're talking about the users with Homestead, it's happening at Carroll, it's happening at these other places. I can tell you from my perspective, the roadblock are the teachers. If you can get programs in there and educate the educators, then you can start to create an environment that is more welcoming for people who are not being welcomed right now. I, earlier this year, reached out to a group of students at Carroll High School who had their play canceled because it had LGBTQ themes. I produced that play for them at the Foaling Room. Thank you. But the kids are the ones who should the kids are the ones who should get the applause. But that play that we were able to put on was a symbol, but it also meant something, especially to people in the LGBTQ community who have had a very difficult year with the anti-LGBTQ legislation. That play made the front page of the Washington Post a week ago. One of the students was interviewed live on MSNBC the same day. I'm doing an interview with NBC News Thursday morning with one of the students. these things can make a difference if we fight back in, I think, ways that really can work. And so I do have a question. My question is actually for Chris. So it sounds like the barrier to renaming Calhoun Street is getting the signatures. Is that a city ordinance that requires that?
Not officially. Well, it's something that the mayor set up, and so it's an ordinance that he set up, I guess, right? I don't know. Benny could. He's.
Benny, hold on just a second. We've got to mic you.
We met with the mayor on that specific issue, and one of the requirements that we get 60% of the residents on Calhoun Street. As you know, he's a politician. He has to satisfy all the residents of Fort Wayne, and it's not a state law. The state law said the mayor could sign off on it, but he would not do that. He let us know that he wouldn't do that because of political reasons. So that's one of the things.
Wow.
So I wonder, since we are in an election year,
Yes.
if the city council, and I think only it takes one city council member to put forward an ordinance that would flip this a little bit and require any street or thing like that that is named after a known member of the Confederacy, that you would need to get over 50% of the people who live on that street to sign that they want to keep it that way. Let's flip this around potentially.
I like it. Taking notes.
And with Juneteenth being right around the corner, I think we might be able to get some media coverage from some of my friends who were here recording earlier tonight. And I would love to talk to you afterwards about hopefully doing something where we could get this, and at the very least raise awareness that who John Calhoun was and what is at the heart of this issue.
Thank you. We have a limited time. Thank you so much for your comment. And so I'm going to ask that, and I don't want people to, be standing up for too long. So if you have a question or a comment, please make it succinct for the rest of the night. I have someone over here, Bishop McAllen.
On a lot of issues, but it all comes down to education. And if we could get in the school system the history books culturally that they've been trying to deny, the young people have an opportunity to learn. There's a lot of things. Fort Wayne has been a bastion of racism. Aboit is an Indian word for field of blood. And Mad Anthony marched the Indians from Waynedale into Aboit and slaughtered them. That's why that whole area is called that. There's a church there that was a Aboit missionary. When they found out a few years ago what the word Aboit meant, they changed their name, not their charter. So it comes down to education, period. And if the young people are educated, if they will allow the curriculum, that's what we ought to be fighting. Get more curriculum in the schools that tells the history of the people who are native to a geographical area. We've got instructors and teachers that can do that. And so if you want to change, it starts with the youth. The word charity starts at home.
Yes,
Well, charity just means love.
yes.
Amen?
Amen.
So we show that, and the best way to do that is in the school system. It shouldn't just stay in the home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop, for that comment. And we're going to go over here. Thank you.
I just want to make a comment because Quentin, this is Claudia Norfleet. You really enthused me by the coverage that you gave on the history of the slavery, especially the 10-year-old. And as a foster parent that I have been well over 20-some-odd years, I have had all races of children. And I could remember one little 4-year-old. They all called me Granny, and I got them, gave them the choice to call me by Miss Claudia, Auntie, or Granny, or just plain Miss Norfleet. So it ended up where my little 4-year-old, who was a Caucasian little boy, he called me Granny, and he went everywhere with me. And whoever was around me, he did not care. He stood up by my side. He went in front of the church during practice and he asked people, "Where's my granny?" And he pointed to me. This young man loved me, and so did all of them. But him especially, I remember, and another one who was never afraid to recognize me. I remember in Walmart, and he was right there in front of me, and there were two Caucasian women asking who was his parents. And he said, "This is my granny." And I said, "And this is my grandson." So it's about the voice as well, Sharon. To be strong and be brave, and the Bible too, Roberta.
Yes.
Because the Bible has all of the commandments and instructions for which way we are to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And believe it and receive it, and God will perform it and provide it. So I thank you for this time. And it certainly has encouraged me, Chris, on Calhoun Street.
Right on.
So thank you.
All right. All right, so we're going to get the two over here, and then we're going to come back on this side.
Two simple words: self-examination. Nobody, or very few people around the world, want to really look into themselves.
It's true.
Because more than likely, they're going to find all kinds of things that they don't like about themselves. But it's normal to have good and bad in everybody. And if everybody, or just a small proportion of people around the world, would do self-examination deeply, we wouldn't even be here tonight.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Self-examination. Ma'am? Okay, that's Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you all for the wonderful panel and the wonderful discussion. I have a comment / question. The lady that was very vulnerable earlier, it kind of reminded me of a lot of people in my culture, myself back in the past as well, of how, in my opinion, white people feel when it comes to white guilt and when it comes to our feelings. And I feel like racism, in my opinion, we utilize that. Obviously it's negative, but I think Chris talked about it a little bit when it's embedded in us. And I think a lot of times white people, we can't even get to a place of discussion because racism is such a term that we run away from, because it's like, you're a devil. For a white person, it's almost like you're, it's the worst thing you can possibly be, in my opinion, of how we see that, or some white people see that. So my question leads to, how can we break that? How can we break that cycle to where we can actually start getting in and understanding how racism works, how it functions? And that goes for black and white people, because I don't believe that we understand as a culture, because we've been kept from learning it, how it works, how it functions, and how it moves through systems, how it moves through groups, how it moves through all of these, because it's in every fabric of our lives in America. So the question is, how do we get to that place?
That's a big question. I don't know that we have the answer, but if you all want to answer in just about a minute or less, so that we can make sure that we get to the other.
I don't think it's a big question.
Oh, okay.
What I said earlier, it is a made-up word, so to speak, in the sense, and again, and anybody, there's pastors in the house, I know there are theologians in the house, or people who have researched in a theologian's capacity. You're not going to find race in the King James. I'm not going to talk about these new-made Bibles. I got a problem with that. That's just me. But you're not going to find that word there. If you go to an older, and I'm a book person, right? I have 6 different Bibles, and I've looked through them. I haven't read each and every page. I've tried real hard. I looked through them, and I don't find that word, race. Now, they may have come up with something that they put in a new Bible. So racism is an economical term separating cultures to label them to be less than or to be categorized in a specific role or role in the egotistical minds of men.
So in terms of how do we get there, are you saying we don't need to, or?
I'm not
what?
saying we don't need to. You need to understand what it is before you start trying to figure out how to get rid of it. And so, it's economical to start with. And there's a lot of walls in our lives, in each of our lives, that are economical by assignment of those who want to dominate man.
So
Men
greater
want to dominate
understanding.
men. That's all there is to it. So let's take a look at what we all have in common. We all take in air and nutrition. We defecate, we urinate, you know. We have babies. We have love, right? We all need all of that. The race, we don't need. There's no need to separate like that.
Chris, you had
I
a
think
comment.
we need to look at racism like we looked at the Rona, right? The virus of racism. It's something that, you know, if at one point we're like, oh, it's the Kung flu, you know, let's blame it on them. It's all our flu now, you know? And how did we battle the Kung flu, you know, the corona, the virus of racism? We wear the mask. The mask doesn't keep me from getting it from you, but it keeps you from getting it from me. So we need the mask of self-reflection, which is what we're doing tonight, of history and looking back. We need to begin to look at our own stories as white folks, not run from the stories of our past. And then we need to wash our hands. You don't just wash your hands at the beginning of the day. You have to wash them throughout. Every time you go to the bathroom, every time you touch the doorknob, my wife makes me wash it all the time. You know, same thing. As white folks, you make a mistake, wash your hands. Don't cower, because so many white folks don't get into the race discussion because they're afraid they're going to look stupid. Who cares? We do look stupid. We're all humans, right? We've all had stupidity in our lives. And the final one is social distance. 6 feet. Instead of 6 feet, virus of racism, we need 6 inches. We need authentic relationships. You can do all the book studies and all the things, and all that's good, but it's wrapped in bias if it's not deep in real relationships. So we need to create environments where we're having authentic relationships, where we're able to tell each other stories and to hear each other and believe each other.
Amen.
So we got to fight the virus of racism, man. It cannot happen. And so white folks, you need to be in black spaces. Not to serve, but to listen and to learn. You need to put yourself, because, you know, and don't just swap pastors. That doesn't do anything. Swap the whole church. Get into a relationship.
Quentin, did you
A
have
lot
comment?
of people are not aware of the fact that there was, and I'm sorry I will not remember his name on this occasion, but there was an African-American man that Hitler was intrigued by. We all know Hitler was the quintessential white supremacist. Hitler came across this gentleman's writing. He was a Rhodes Scholar, and Hitler couldn't believe an African-American man was this intelligent. And he actually wanted to meet him, and he met him. This one African-American man is said to have dined with Hitler. And Hitler came to the conclusion that this man was only as intelligent as he was because he had been trained by white people.
I know what you're talking about.
So we need to understand that we are humans. We're complex beings. And will we ever solve the issue of racism? We won't, unfortunately. However, occasions like this, where people who are conscientious about wanting to do the right thing, needing to do the right thing, as long as we outnumber them, who will never accept the idea that all men are created equal, then the world will keep marching forward. The moral arc of the universe will keep tending towards justice.
Amen.
That's all we can do, is make sure that that happens.
House by
Thank
house.
you, Quentin.
House
Thank you.
by
Thank
house.
you so much. We have 2 people standing, and that's going to be all the comments that we have time for. I do have a couple of index cards, so I just want to make sure you have a moment.
Thank you to each of you for sharing your wisdom and your time with us this evening. My question is for Quentin. As someone who is deeply concerned about Allen County's proposal to build a new jail and to expand on incarceration, for the very reasons that you highlighted in your presentation, your powerful slides. I wonder, with your work with your clients, when you're going into the jail and when you're getting to know the people that you're working with, I wonder what you envision or what you see that might have helped them before they even got caught up in the system, before they even landed in jail.
We're going to need 2 more hours.
That's another schedule.
You got 1 minute.
As to the jail, in that regard, every time they have expanded the jail in terms of capacity, they filled it up right away. Again, the fact that they've been able to decrease the numbers because they were forced to do so, again, I think is indicative of the fact that everybody who was in that jail should not have been in the jail, for starters. My hope is that they don't necessarily build a bigger jail, they simply build a better jail. And in terms of what I wish could have happened before some of the people got involved with the criminal justice system, there's so many inputs. I mean, it goes to parenting. I'm representing now grandsons of people that I represented when I first started practicing. And it is a cycle that feeds and breeds upon itself. And again, you could go back to those grandparents who may have been foster parents, children themselves, or in group homes, or et cetera. There are some kids that unfortunately are not brought into this world and raised in a manner where they can make good decisions. They're not from stable homes. They have parents that are alcoholics, drug addicts, et cetera. So I just wish that there were more resources for, again, those children. And hats off to people like Claudia Norfleet. I don't know where she is, if she's still here, and Joyce Graham Coates, and people who take it upon themselves to become foster parents and do what they can to help these children. The more resources we have to, again, address issues, education, mental health issues. There were a lot of people in that jail. I have 2 clients right now who are going through the criminal justice system who committed crimes by virtue of their mental health condition. And fortunately, we do have a prosecutor's office. I was a public defender for 27 years in 2 months, not that I was counting. But I was in the serious felony division. I did the murders, the robberies, the shootings. That's what I did. But we do have a prosecutor's office under Mike McAlexander, and we did under Karen Richards, where they will listen, and both these individuals, fortunately, will not be stigmatized with a criminal conviction. So as long as we have lawyers out there that will provide zealous advocacy for their clients, when they do get to the system, that makes for better outcomes. But again, getting to the young people, particularly, who are at risk, finding some of these kids, like the 10-Point Coalition is doing, that are not prone to, or may have factors that indicate that they will be involved in gun violence, gangs, and that sort of things. We got to divert them. We have to find resources within this community to divert them. and help their parents be better parents, et cetera. So I know it's a lot, and that's a Cliff Notes version of what I think needs to happen. But again, it would take a lot of community involvement and resources to really start getting to a point where we are significantly reducing the criminality among certain demographics.
Thank you, Quentin, for that. We have one more person standing, and then y'all are going to have to answer some questions afterwards, because I still have some index cards that we didn't get to. So, ma'am, I want to give you an opportunity to speak.
Hello. Oh, there we go. Sorry. This question is also for Mr. Ellis. I'm relatively new to Fort Wayne, and sometimes I will see like Office of Correction Facility, I assume they're escorting prisoners around to do work around the city, and based on your presentation, how common is that here in Fort Wayne, as mentioned, that it's sort of
remnant of the chain gangs, I guess.
Yeah.
It's very common. Community service is often ordered for people who have been sentenced on different crimes, mostly lower level felonies and misdemeanors, but typically it's reserved for people who are not employed. People who are working full-time often are exempted from having to do a community service. So, but it is, in this county, very common.
Thank you so much. We have had some great discussion tonight, and I want to just thank every one of you for coming out and attending this. Could we just give everybody a round of applause? Amazing, amazing, amazing. As we close, we're a couple minutes behind schedule, but as we close, I do want to give each of the panelists 1 minute for closing remarks. And then, as you know, there are some vendor tables in the lobby. You can stop there and ask some more questions. We got a question here about entrapment and enslavement. And poverty, a correlation between poverty and incarceration. So we're going to let Quentin answer those afterward, because I know he couldn't answer those in 1 minute. But you know that we have, I think, some snacks out there as well, some food so that you can partake in that and mingle a little bit. But as we close, I do want to give the panelists 1 minute. Y'all think they can take to 1 minute? You think they could keep to that? I don't. 1 minute.
I just want to thank y'all for being here. This is so reassuring. Okay, I candidly didn't expect this kind of a turnout for this. It was reassuring that enough people cared to come and talk about history and healing and how we can move forward in these areas and help make at least our community a better community. And I just want to thank you all for coming out.
Okay, so we're thanking them again. And then, Chris, or was that your 1 minute? Quentin?
That was my minute.
Oh, that was his minute, wonderful.
That was smooth.
Chris.
That was smooth. That was real smooth.
Chris, and in your 1 minute closing, I want you to, if you can address this question as well, because I know this is lingering out there. If we change the name of Calhoun Street, of course there are other streets and monuments and things named for people who were slave owners and people who were less than savory. So where does it end, or why is this so important in light of all of those things?
Right. I mean, for me, I'm an outsider, so I've come in and I've been invited by the Martin Luther King Club to do this, and as I've been here, I've seen a lot of streets that could be changed. Like I said, it's important to tell the story. And that's why I'm glad the mayor didn't just change the street before I came in and just, oh, we have Martin Luther King, yay, because it's by telling the story that we begin to get out of the water and begin to look at the situations are. And so right now we got to change Calhoun Street because that's where we're working at. If somebody else wants to change Douglas Street, which is right in front of the African American Museum. Do we know about Douglas, who fought against Abraham Lincoln and said slavery was good and put Abraham Lincoln on the spot. And in fact, when he was here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, he ended up getting all the votes from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they took an effigy of Abraham Lincoln and lynched him at the courthouse. And yet, the black neighborhood has Douglas. All we have to do is add an S, and we can make it Frederick Douglass.
Chris, thank you. Was that your?
Was that a minute?
That was,
more.
yeah,
No.
it was about 2 and 3 seconds, but, okay.
I don't know if I can top these two. But I do want to say, since my area is the history behind all of it, you would be amazed doing genealogy research, the things that you will discover. And I do mean you will discover things. History pops up all along the highway of your genealogy research, which is why I have a lot of information on things that you just absolutely would not imagine that I could address. Going back with this blackface situation, the disrespect that it garners up in people, and when you think about it, it has been doing it ever since the enslaved people arrived. They made entertainment out of it, and they perpetuated that entertainment in mainstream America all the way through. Well, we guess we're going to have to include that little video thing that the young lady did at Homestead, because I guess she thought it was entertaining, and it was not. So I truly believe that you need to take a look at history. You need to understand where we are, how we got there, and what part can you play to change things. We got mothers, grandmothers, grandfathers, uncles, all of us have a part in nurturing the mind of the young people that we are exposed to. And we need to take advantage of what it is that we can offer them. Don't just assume that it's okay. That young lady assumed that blackface was okay. It was not. She didn't understand what she was doing. She truly did not understand what she was doing. And many of you are here because you don't fully understand the whole impact, or didn't fully understand the impact of blackface and what it signified. You got dishes, postcards, artwork, people getting thousands of dollars to go around making a fool out of somebody else without authorization to do so and without fact. So I suggest you walk away tonight with a project, an assignment, if you will. Investigate some of these thoughts that you take for granted and discover where you went wrong deciding that it was okay just because it wasn't you. Now that's my genealogy tip for tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. And I sincerely want to thank each and every each panelist here, Quentin, Chris, and Roberta. They stepped up to the plate for this, despite their hectic and very busy schedules, and just did this. And so I am so grateful to you for doing so, and I think that I know that we all gained something from this discussion and from this presentation tonight. I want to thank the library. Let me tell you, all the people I need to thank. I want to thank all the partners, the library who are supplying these snacks tonight, and the venue, the African American Genealogical Society, the MLK Club. Quentin L. Ellis took time away from his practice to be here tonight, and YWCA, who is also a partner and have been helping with some various things here. I want to tell you, just a little plug for Health Visions Midwest. We have a program coming up on June 28th. We invite each of you to come. It is called Community Development, Health, and Well-Being. And it is about how community development can affect our well-being and health, and how it often plays into some of the trauma that we experience. I'm telling you, it's going to be fascinating. Zachary Benedict, who is the Journal-Gazette Person of the Year for 2022, is going to be giving that presentation, and that's going to be June 28th at 9:30 right here at the library. For more information, please go to our website, hvusa.org. .org. We've got snacks in the lobby, visit vendors, all of that. Again, thank you. We just can't stop thanking you. Quinn, I'm thanking you again. You're being thanked for the 4th and 5th time. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening.